Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Radical Center. Welcome back, Cody. You are back. Isn't that
I
great?
am back. Yes, how are you?
Not bad at all. I am excited. I am happy. We have all the elections now behind us, at least for a little while. It is a minority government, so you never know. There could be an election tomorrow. Hopefully not. I think I can speak for most, if not all Canadians, that we are a little bit tired and we would like some stability. So let's talk a little bit about the results. We did have a broadcast, but we couldn't stay up all night because we got tired, and so did the rest of the world. But anyway, let's talk about the election results from the Atlantic, from Ontario and BC. Cody, what do you think?
Well, I think this was a quite the interesting election. I mean, as I said on the election night, I genuinely, when I said that anything other than a conservative minority would shock me, I'm still genuinely in shock for a number of reasons, but primarily because in the last few weeks of the campaign, but from my point of view, the Liberals, they took their foot off the gas. They thought they were headed for a majority. Trump was in the news less. And even especially during the debates, it focused back on the bread and butter issues, right? I think covering Trump was one of the smallest parts of the debates. But all around, the results were interesting. I mean, if you take a look at Atlantic Canada, they flipped one seat, but I think they lost. Sorry, when I say they, I mean the Conservatives. They flipped one seat in Newfoundland. They came within 12 votes of flipping another seat. It was the closest seat in the country, Terra Nova and the Peninsulas. In Ontario was interesting because when the results were coming in, um, conservatives were flipping some seats and then losing a few others. I mean, Brampton West really shocked me because I thought it was going to be a clean sweep. But I think the summary for the conservatives of this election is that it was a good election. They did not win. They came 25 seats close of winning a plurality. But now they have a base to grow on. And we'll talk more about
Yeah.
uh, that specifically.
Yeah, we'll talk
But
about
what
that.
yeah.
We're going to talk all about Pierre Poilievre and
Yeah.
what he's going to do next or what he should do next. But one thing that we kept talking about throughout the election is what is the ballot box question? And you very specifically put it as, the ballot box question, if the Liberals win, will be Donald Trump. And if the Conservatives win, it will be about affordability and pocketbook issues and long-standing affordability issues before Donald Trump. I think honestly, it turned out to be a mixture of both. I don't think there was a clear ballot box question, although Donald Trump certainly was a huge factor. But I think the bigger factor perhaps had to do more so with the NDP collapsing, and I'm going to call it a strategic collapse. Most likely to keep Poilievre from forming government, but also perhaps to get a new leader because they've been unhappy with their leader for some time. So I honestly don't think there was a very clear ballot box issue. It was a mixture of the two. What do you think?
That's interesting the way you put it. And I guess the results could support your argument because in terms of seat count, the conservatives and the liberals, they were no, there's a 25 seat gap, right? But I mean, I think Donald Trump, rightly or wrongly, influenced the outcome of this election. You're right. It was pretty much a binary choice, right? And I think at the end of the day, I think that there were a lot of people that were afraid of Donald Trump, and that decided their vote. The NDP, yes, they collapsed. I don't think they're dead though. They'll make a comeback. Without Trump in the picture, the NDP will be back with a vengeance, and that's going to be a challenge that I think Mark Carney is going to have as prime minister. But yeah, I think we're both right in a way. I think I can be right in the sense that Donald Trump won the ballot box issue, but you're also right in saying that there might not be a clear ballot box question because it was so close.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're right about the NDP. They will certainly make a comeback, and it will be certainly Mark Carney that will have to deal with the impact of that. I think the next election will not look like this one. This was a very different election. This was a very historic election. I think things will be different in the future, although it's very early to say. We should give Mr. Carney some time to govern before we start making, opinions or forming opinions about how well he's going to do or how well he's doing. But I think if 4 years pass by and he is still the prime minister and there's an election coming, things will be significantly different, and the factors that will influence. I always say there are several factors that influence the outcome of an election. You have to learn what the factors are, what are the factors you can control, and do your best to control them. And then you also have to learn what are the factors that you can't control and do your best to mitigate against them. So this was that kind of election where there was just too many factors that nobody could control. And I think Carney did the best job of mitigating against them. There are a lot of things that Pierre needs to work on, but we're going to get to that. First, we're going to talk about the Liberal minority. So what should Mr. Carney focus on? Well, Prime Minister Carney, we should call him that now.
Yeah, I wish we had done this podcast the day after the election, because there are three things that I think that he should have as his priorities, and he's already done two of them. So I'm going to give him a little bit of credit. The first thing that he should do, and that he is going to do, is meet with Trump. If he were listening to me, my number one advice to him is act more like Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron than Vladimir Zelensky. Do not go in there thinking that you are a tough guy and you're going to convince Donald Trump otherwise. Go in there, you be respectful, you say your piece, and you get a win out of it if you do it that way. Then the second thing is let Pierre win a by-election. And it sounds like Mark Carney is not going to get in the way of calling a by-election. He's going to do that as quick as he possibly can. Now, the timing of that is going to be interesting, which we'll talk about when we get to talking about Pierre. But so yeah, that's 2 out of 3. So the third one is he needs to make a deal with Trump. And whatever deal that is, it'll have to include, easing some of the tariffs. It might have to start at renegotiating the current trade deal that we have with the United States. My gut feeling that he is going to get a deal with Trump. So right now, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, as the Meatloaf song goes. But we'll see how the third one shakes out, because he is going to be beating President Trump on Tuesday. What do you think?
I agree with that. I think that all of those priorities should definitely be his priorities. But I also think that there's one more priority that he needs to focus on. This country has gone through a lot since COVID. A lot. A pandemic followed by economic troubles, affordability issues, a housing crisis.
And we're still going through it.
We're still going through it. It hasn't ended, right? Tariff threats, very, very difficult issues abroad that have had a lot of local impact on us as Canadians. So he needs to unite the country. And in order to do that, he needs stability. He can't. Pierre's going to get back in the House, and fair. His party wants to keep him. They want to give him a seat. Let him back in the House. But the country needs stability. And I don't know if Pierre's going to turn down the rhetoric, which we're going to talk about, because I think he needs to do that. He needs to grow up a little, right? Because clearly Canadians don't like your style, right? So we're going to talk more about Pierre, but what I think Carney really needs to do is he needs to work with the NDP, the Bloc, the Conservatives, the Green Party to figure out a way to stabilize things for the next 4 years. And that could look many ways. I read an article, another agreement with one or two of the parties, but I actually really like the idea of him inviting members from other parties to join his cabinet, and allow minority government to be what it's supposed to be, working together, not standing and just exchanging insults all day long, because it's political theater. We all know that that's not how decisions get made, right? So I think he needs to provide stability, and I think he needs to figure out a way to unite the country. Not just because of Donald Trump, but sure, that is a big reason. But because Canadians have been through a lot and, we need to come together from coast to coast, and we need to stop hearing about separation of this, separation of that, and this and then the other thing. Will he govern for four full years? I just presented my solution of how he could go about doing that. But what do you think, Cody?
Only if the NDP allows it. It's as simple as that. I don't
And they
think
will. They will, because they need to.
I don't know. I don't think it'll be the full. I think there is a reasonable, huh?
They need to rebuild. They've got nothing.
Well, I don't know. Here's the thing. What does rebuilding mean? Because the question they have to ask themselves is, did they lose because of Donald Trump, or did they lose because NDP voters don't like them anymore? Right? That's the question they have to ask. If they start to see that they gain support once Donald Trump, is no longer the top issue, then maybe they want to go to the polls early. Maybe they'll ask themselves, well, Jake Meat kind of messed up in not calling an election in the fall, so I don't think it'll last the full 4 years. I think once we get past this Donald Trump thing, maybe 2 years, maybe 3.
You don't think the Donald Trump thing will last 4 years? He just got in the White House.
No, I don't think so. Because
I think it's going to be on and off for 4 years until he's gone.
But at that point, people just become numb to it.
Yeah, but that fear is still going to be there. It'll be like lingering in the background. People are starting to get numb to it now.
I don't know. We'll see. It's to be determined.
All right.
We can
wait.
We will. Yeah, we can wait and see.
We'll get back to you in 4 years on the.
In 4 years, yes. Hopefully, we're still around.
Okay, let's talk about. I think this is going to be my favorite part of the show. What's next for Pierre Poilievre? How the hell did he lose that riding?
We're going to disagree. And we're going to agree to disagree. I know we're going to disagree. I'm not going to get ahead of you.
You know what I'm saying.
I know what you're going to say, and we're going to disagree. That is, in the national picture, that is a small part of it, I believe. So there are 3 reasons. There are 2-ish that I would say that are the most important of the reason why he lost his riding. I think that the riding redistribution had a lot to do with it. I think that he had a well-funded and well-supported opponent. You and I both know, because we've been involved in politics, is that when people run against a party leader, typically they don't get any support. They're putting their name on the ballot to be a sacrificial lamb. And I think that, to Bruce Fanjoy's credit, he fundraised money, he got the support, he got volunteers, and he worked his ass off canvassing for 2 years. So I think that was a big part of it. A third reason, I think, it's maybe a small percentage, is the longest ballot. I think that the ballot, the psychological impact that it has on voters, I do think that it made a bit of an impact. And that's to the credit of the longest ballot committee, or whatever the hell they're called. They partly won here too. Yeah. Right?
I love troublemakers.
So they get some credit too, because, I looked at the ballot myself and I'm like, holy geez, it took me a while to find Pierre's name. So imagine the average person. The reason why I say that, and I don't think that it's his personality, is because he's been that representative for 20 years. And I think that you don't survive that long if people don't like you. So, but you could go ahead, you say your piece. I know what you're going to say, but go ahead and say it.
He knows what I'm going to say, people. He knows what I'm going to say. You're right. I disagree. I don't think it's his personality. I think it's the persona he built after he became the leader. Those are 2 different things, right? I don't know Pierre, but he seems like a nice guy. His wife seems to like him. He seems...
I would hope that she does.
I don't think he's going around being mean to people on the street. Yeah. I don't think he's doing that, right? But I do think he built a persona after he became the leader that people weren't aware of when he wasn't the leader, because, people don't pay that much attention to, even if you're a cabinet minister. Most people don't pay that much attention, right? If you ask the average Canadian to name 3 cabinet ministers, I don't know if they'd be able to. But he built this persona after he became the leader, which was not popular, right? This brash, anti-media, anti-this, anti-that. Buddy, you're running in Ottawa, man. Like you can't do that. Right? And this new seat is in a different part of the country where that might be a little bit more popular, right? But you can't do that. There's just certain things that just didn't go over well. Like it was just like you can't imagine this guy being prime minister and running a country and going to speak on behalf of Canada in different places when he's just being like he doesn't want to talk to the reporters and won't answer questions and then this, that, and the other thing. So I don't think it's his personality. I think it's the persona he built, which was strategic. This was their strategy. It was supposed to be, not, I don't want to say MAGA 2.0 because I don't necessarily think they were going for that. I think they were going for, that whole like brash Trump style, whatever. But that doesn't work for everyone. It just works for Trump. And I am no fan of Trump as I say this, but Trump has a sense of humor.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you said that because, yes.
Like, if you listen to that man, it's entertaining. Go on TikTok and just watch how many videos are of people like doing Trump impersonations because he is entertaining. Pierre's not entertaining at all, right? It doesn't work.
My father-in-law and I were sitting at the table and we were talking about this, right?
Yeah.
And he said, Pierre has to stop smiling. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's kind of uncomfortable, right? And he's like, the guy's got to stop smiling and he's got to put his glasses back on because that's not who he is. I think we might find a little bit of
gym so much. No, I'm kidding. Go to the gym, Pierre. It's healthy.
Yeah. Gym is good. The other thing that I would say is what I think he needs to do is he has to find a way to, yes, be more funnier, but he also has to say to a certain group of people, and you got to they have to figure them out on their own. I don't have all the data or whatever, but they have to make the argument that Trump did during the election. And what he said is, look, you may not like me. You may think I'm an asshole. And yeah, I am, right? Trump admits who he is. But at the same time, you have to push your ballot question. Do you want another 4 years of this liberal government? Is your life better off than it was 4 or 10 years or whatever? So there is some things that he does have to do personality-wise. I do agree that there has to be something changed.
He needs a persona that actually, well, again, I don't know his personality, so maybe he is not a nice guy. I don't know. But he needs a persona that would work for his personality.
Right. And he started at near the end of the campaign, he did a few podcasts that nobody watches, but we'll just say he did a few podcasts. And he said, he was asked the question is, why do some people not like you? And he gave a good answer. He said, look, I understand. Some people don't like it when I'm angry. I am angry that there's a housing crisis. There's an affordability crisis. I'm angry when people come up to me and tell me that, their family members have died from fentanyl overdoses. That's where I think he should go, because at least you could plant it in people's mind that he knows the way he comes off, but this is why he comes off that way.
He doesn't sound angry. He sounds miserable. He doesn't come across angry. He just looks like he's just grumpy. Angry is different. Angry means there's passion involved. He just comes across as he's grumpy and he's trying to be sarcastic, but he's also not funny. So his jokes don't really land. Like, they don't really get any laughs. He's trying to make fun of someone, but like, it's not really that funny. So it's kind of like, meh. So he just comes off like, he's like just a grumpy guy. And like, he's like, oh, everything sucks. And kind of like, okay, yeah. But like, now what? So.
My advice, I think one of the regrets that they should have done during the campaign is they should have done a little bit more independent media. I do think that he would have benefit. Like, there's a Canadian podcaster called the Nelk Boys. They started out here in Mississauga. They're pranksters, they're jokesters, they're young hip guys, and they tried to reach out and they tried to get him to come on, and he wouldn't do it. People like Theo Vaughn. Some of these, yes, they're American, but some of them, there's a lot of crossover, there's a lot of overlap. And one of the things that I did notice from especially young men is that they were telling me, why doesn't Pierre go on this podcast or that podcast? And I think that the communication strategy was just, I think they had a message for that demographic, but I just don't think that they used it to the fullest extent. And I think that if he does more long form, I think that it'll open up his personality more. And look, if it's a minority parliament, the Liberals were just reelected and he's got some time now. So they really have to, because if he really wants to be prime minister, he does have to figure out how he builds on what he's already gained. And I think personality is a little bit of a factor in that.
I agree. And one more thing before we move on Pierre and what he needs to do. He needs to tone it down with some of the right-wing rhetoric. Clearly, it is not popular. And if you really look at what happened this election with the NDP voters basically flocking to the Liberals to be the gatekeepers and say, absolutely not. You don't want that happening again. And it will happen again. Right? Clearly now we know no one is going to take any risks with any rights for any groups. So he needs to stop saying things like he wants to deport protesters and he wants to do this and he wants to do that. He needs to calm down on all the right-wing social conservative stuff. No one likes it. And certainly, even 40%, look at that, 40% wasn't enough.
Yeah.
You're not getting 60%, buddy, with that stuff.
Yeah.
And certainly not with that persona. So
yeah. I can understand where you're coming from. What I would say to that is that that's not who he is. And he's made it very clear that, these are the culture wars and whatnot. He's not going to change. So he has to figure out a way that he can interpret or integrate that or not integrate it or whatever. I think when it comes to some of I'll say that during this election campaign, that when it came to the wedge issues like abortion and guns, that never affected him. He had good answers. When it came to abortion, he said, no, we're not touching that. People question him on LGBT rights, and he said, no, we're not touching that. Andrew Scheer couldn't say that people would have women would have choice over their bodies because it was a moral conviction of his. He was pro-life. Aaron O'Toole, what he tried to do on the fly was he tried to incorporate the pro-choice views into the Conservative Party, and it pissed off a lot of pro-lifers. What Pierre was able to do, I think, within the party is he was able to say, look, we're not going to be reopening these issues. You're welcome to have your own opinions, but we're not going to be reopening these issues. And I think that was one of the things that went on during the campaign that I think went under the radar. I obviously, as a conservative, I believe that these social issues are not going to become an issue if the Conservatives were ever to form government.
Yeah, and
I digress.
And perhaps you're probably right. I don't think I don't know, right? But he needs to, again, soften that persona. He needs to be more welcoming to more people, more communities. He has to win seats in the GTA. Look at this.
I would say
Mississauga, Brampton. Can't win, can't be in government. Just come visit, see what's going on here. Get to know us a little bit.
And they were close in Brampton.
Yeah.
Less in every single riding in Brampton, they were less than 2,000 votes away from forming government. So when I came on this podcast and I was losing my shit because there were candidates who only lost by a couple hundred votes, who were at the rally 2 hours before it fucking started.
Yeah, you were saying that.
Dude, you're supposed to be knocking doors. Why are you standing around in a corner talking to people who are already voting for you? I mean, like, you could have won your seat, dude. Like, a couple hundred votes, like, that's for a candidate himself, that's about 2.5 votes per household. So that's 50 households. So that's a couple hours worth of canvassing, and you could have won. Look at the person in Newfoundland, the Conservative, who lost by 12 votes. 12 votes. That guy's probably kicking himself in the head because he's like, maybe I shouldn't have wasted 2 hours and went for coffee with this nobody who said he was going to help me, but he didn't, right?
Agreed.
But what I think...
He's probably thinking, I could probably name 12 people that could have convinced to vote for me.
I can name...
Poor guy, I feel bad for you, you
right.
know.
The other thing,
there.
I would say pocketbook, pocketbook, pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what it comes down to, if you have the choice between going ideological and pocketbook, pocketbook, because pocketbook wins 100% of the time. So
ideological does not win any elections. No one wins elections on ideology. They win on pocketbook issues. They also win on some hope and dream of the future, or they win by scaring you about something. When it's like a monster in the room. This time there was a monster in the room. Well, you know, my apologies, Mr. Trump. But metaphorically, there was a monster, right? And that's...
The other thing is, one more thing before we move on from Pierre. I figured out why Donald Trump doesn't like Pierre.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's
Donald Trump...
him and he's not doing a good job.
No. He knows. So Donald Trump his party is conservative, right? Pierre Poilievre is leader of the Conservative Party. And when push came to shove, when he was being pushed around by different people, and we don't have to get into it, but just long story short, Donald Trump does not like people who can be pushed around. And what happened to Pierre Poilievre is he was pushed around. First, he was just talking about the economy, and that's what he was going to run on. But then he was literally dragged by his heels to talk, to stand strong against Trump, because that's what people in Canada wanted. Trump does not like weak people like that. So I think that's the reason why. Donald Trump doesn't like Pierre Poilievre. Whereas Mark Carney, Donald Trump knows Mark Carney hates his guts. But at the same time, they have a good personal relationship, is from what I can tell. So that's what I think that's the real reason why Donald Trump doesn't like Pierre Poilievre. But I digress.
Well, maybe we will see. But I'm sticking to my theory. He's copying him, and he's not that funny.
Okay.
All right. One more thing about Pierre before we move on. Did Doug Ford contribute to this loss?
I don't know if he contributed to the loss, but I think that not having the help of I would say the most popular conservative premier in the country, I think that it certainly didn't help. And like we talked about before, politics is transactional. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Pierre didn't help Ford during Ford's election, and in turn, Ford didn't help Pierre. That's just the way business and politics works. Somebody messaged me, I think it was like a week or so before the election, and they said, Cody, Doug Ford has to come out and endorse Pierre. And I said, no, it's too late. I said, you got to understand how campaigns work. It's not just about the person coming out and putting their name behind a candidate. It's about giving them money, volunteers, and getting behind them in an infrastructure way. And that, even if Doug Ford endorsed Pierre Poilievre 3 days or a week before the election, I don't think it would have had that much of an impact. I don't think it would have worked, because at that point, the cake was already baked. The third thing that I would say, and I think that we will agree on this, is that Pierre does have to build more relationships in the Conservative Party, people like Tim Houston and people like Doug Ford. Now, I know that Doug Ford, when Patrick Brown first ran for mayor of Brampton, he basically sent Michael Diamond, was basically one of his top advisors, to go and defeat Patrick Brown. And here we are, was it 7 or 8 years later?
Yeah.
And Patrick Brown endorsed Doug Ford, gave him support. Patrick Brown helped Doug Ford beat Bonnie Crombie in her own riding. So there is success to people working together. I don't think that Doug Ford would be vindictive. He doesn't come across to me as that way, but he does have to build more relationships, because if you don't, you might never win an election.
I agree with everything you said, but I'm going to add one more to it. Governing is different than electioneering or campaigning. Very, very different worlds, right? For the most part, it looks like the provincial governments of specifically, well, I'm going to talk about Ontario because Ford says it publicly, and perhaps even Tim Houston. They seem to be happy working with the federal Liberals. I don't think that they love them. I don't think it's true that Doug Ford has a shirt underneath that says he's a Liberal. But I think there is an art and a science to governing. And when you have good relationships in a higher level of government, whether you're at the municipality or whether you're at the school board, right? And there's a higher level of government. In their case, it would be the federal government, and you have good relationships there, which means you have a good relationship with the minister. Your staff have good relationships with you have a direct line to the prime minister's office. You already know how everything works. Sometimes you don't really want to jumble it all up.
Yeah, that's
For
right.
anyone. For anyone. Even if you love the guy, you're kind of like, but like, we know what we're doing. We have a plan. You know, we have issues and like how it works is there's an issue, there's things that you're waiting on follow-ups on, right? So, and imagine that across ministries, imagine that, you know, across everywhere. So it's sometimes, you know, and I'm speaking like just from my experience at the school board level, right? So imagine, you know, higher levels of government who have so much work and so much at stake and so much going on. Add to that the guy wasn't really that popular to begin with. Add to that the fact that he wasn't necessarily going anywhere. And it looked like they really screwed up this campaign, and he wasn't going to win. Why would he endorse him and ruin all his relationships that already exist? Right?
And the other thing that I would say too about Doug Ford, and this is the way I put it to a lot of my there are a lot of conservative friends who believe that meme, you know, with him ripping off and showing under a liberal shirt. You got to ask yourself, if you're a conservative, this is for nobody else, okay? Just if you're a conservative and you don't like Doug Ford, the question you got to ask yourself is, would you rather a conservative who wins elections with support from all different colors? Or would you rather a liberal or a new Democrat premier who knows, maybe they don't care what conservatives think? So, I mean, for Doug Ford, he learned the hard way of what you just started off with, is that governing is different from campaigning. And while there are a lot of things, and it's well documented on here, that I disagree with Doug Ford about, he is much better than the alternative. And that is why you have to take his model of building relationships with everybody. If you look at what the Conservatives achieved in southwestern Ontario, home of the auto sector, a few Liberal and a few NDP seats, that's something to build on when you're talking about pocketbook issues. So yeah, I think we could see eye to eye on that when it comes to Doug Ford. And I think that it's going to be something and that's something only Pierre can. He's got to be the person to make that decision, because he's the leader, he's the boss, and he has to decide. I'll just say it now. I mean, if the guy puts his glasses back on and he goes back to, being more of an asshole, then, that's not serious, right? And I don't think that he would ever win government if he goes back to that. So that's all we have to say about Pierre, I think. Now we're going to look at what's next for the NDP.
Yeah, we talked a little bit here and there about the NDP. What do you think is next for them?
I don't know. They're not going to
disappear, that's for sure.
No, they're not going to disappear. They're going to come back.
Yeah.
But they really have to ask themselves who they want to be. And I know that sounds cliche, but the number one reason why they took losses was because of Trump. I think that was the top issue was Trump, and they didn't want the Conservatives to form government. That's the top issue. But you also got to look at, like, in places, like I said, like southwestern Ontario, or places like Hamilton, right? A lot of union and blue collar workers, they decided to vote Conservative. And one of the things, as I mentioned on the live stream, something I've never seen before, is that a lot of, from all trades, all different backgrounds and whatnot, blue collar workers were voting Conservative because their pocketbook, right? And they felt that they were left behind, right? And that showed in the results. Young people tend to lean more to the left by a significant margin, but now it's the Conservatives that are winning young people by, I think it was 10, 15 points. And now it's the boomers that are voting to the left. So they have to figure out what they want to do, right? And I hope that, if I were a New Democrat supporter, if they're going to support the government and they're going to get big, key policy things achieved, that maybe they might want to take some credit for it, because that's one of the things that Jagmeet screwed up, is he may have forced the government to do pharmacare and dental care, but he got no credit for it. He lost his own seat too. I don't know. I don't know what's next for them. They have a lot of questions. I mean, much like the Conservatives, they have a lot of questions asked themselves.
Yeah, both parties have to do a lot of soul searching. They got to figure out who they are, what they stand for. You got to maybe call up some liberal friends and ask them, because they do that a lot. No, I'm joking. That wasn't nice. Yes. I read online, just a little segue, by somebody who was on our show on Monday. Our friend Ahmed El Bayoumi, he has a newsletter called Polycorner for those who are interested, and he recently has a headline that says that there's going to be a leadership review in the fall. September is when they are. This is for the provincial, for Bonnie's.
Oh, I see.
To decide Bonnie's fate. So.
That's another thing. You think Bonnie's sitting there now, that Carney is saying that he won't get in the way of a by-election. She's probably sitting there and she's probably kissing her teeth, because she probably wants to get a seat in the legislature too.
Yeah, like, wait, oh, you mean like provincially?
Yeah, like, I mean, at the end of it, like at the end of the last.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I guess it's a little bit different.
I don't think Fuller will have the same graciousness towards her. I don't think so. Oh no, we're talking about very different things.
So she's gonna have a leadership review.
That's the word on the street. That's the word in Polycorner. Not on the street.
Okay.
In Polycorner. So we'll see.
So the question is,
will she survive?
Will she survive? What do you think?
I think it depends on whether anybody is actually interested in the leadership after her. So if there is a candidate, a relatively well-known candidate, and I'm not going to throw out any names, even though I have.
Come on.
I'm not doing it. No, it's too early. If there is a candidate who is interested in the leadership and organizes, and then organizers start organizing to get her out, then she will not survive. But if no one cares and no one's interested because they think that the party is not going to win the next election, and they're calling it out, like they're just writing it off that early, and it's just a little club, their little clique,
slightly bigger than a minivan.
Yes, this, if it's just the Bonnie clique voting for Bonnie, then they'll win, right? But if you're asking me if there's an actual effort to organize against her and there is a potential replacement leader in the wings, she will not survive.
I concur with you on that point. The other thing that I would say is, I remember saying this, I think it was during the live stream, I had said that, her ego would not allow her to resign.
Mm-hmm.
That so far hasn't happened. The other thing is to whether people care or not. Yeah. Right? Do they care enough to mobilize to get her out? And I don't know, like you said, I don't know that there's anybody that really does.
I don't care. Unless there's a big name leader who wants to actually take over and rebuild the party and restart.
Yeah.
I don't see any, but here's my point about this. There is this whole idea that a lot of people subscribe to, especially in partisan circles, that if there's a federal Liberal government, there won't be a provincial Liberal government in Ontario. And Carney just won, which is going to, if he stays the 4 years, and I think he will, that's going to take us past the next provincial election.
Right.
Or they might be in the same year. Who knows? Doug can call it early again. We don't know what would happen.
If it is Doug, it might even be Lecce. Right? You're gonna start a fight now, okay?
Now we're not gonna go home. If it is Premier Brown or Premier Lecce,
there we go.
Who are deciding when this election is going to be. Both very popular, both she would not do well against, by the way. Where was I going with this? Where I was going with this is that there's this whole idea that, oh, if there's a federal liberal government, there won't be a provincial liberal government. And so you may have like just not a lot of interest because it's just kind of, okay, this is just how it goes. And this is, the way it goes. And also now with Pierre potentially not leaving and getting a seat and sticking around. And then what does that mean for a federal leadership race? We were all expecting potentially Doug to go in that direction, but maybe that won't be happening anytime soon. So,
well, there's still time for me to be right about that. I don't think, and again, I said if he resigns. So yeah. I think that Pierre is going to stay on. Mm-hmm. There would have to be a caucus revolt, and that could happen. Like, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but by all accounts, we're on Friday, the day after he gave his concession speech, Wednesday morning, basically. Mm-hmm. And it seems that he has buttoned down the communications and they made it clear that he is going to stay on. Whether that lasts or not, we will have to see. The other thing with like Bonnie Crombie, just quickly going back to her, is I did say in the election live stream too, which I forgot to say a few minutes ago, but whatever. If you don't have a seat, it doesn't give you much credibility. So again, people are not going to care. So that's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, the Liberals provincially, they got a lot of crap to figure out. The Conservatives, soul searching. They have a lot to figure out.
One big convention and just like take different floors or whatever. Or like different rooms, and each party soul search.
Well, the NDP, the federal NDP, will be having a leadership race as well.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I mean, some people have said Rachel Notley. Mm-hmm.
Heather McPherson.
I don't know. Heather McPherson. There was another name.
Matthew Green.
Yeah, Matthew Green. There was another name that's not coming to my mind. Yeah, but that's they're going to have a federal NDP leadership, and then that person is going to have to get a seat. So I wonder if Carney will be nice to them as well, because chances are they're going to want to choose a safe NDP seat, and there's only 7 members to choose from. So who's gonna sacrifice themselves?
That's true.
Like this guy who is stepping aside for Pierre, I just learned this, but he's 6 months away from getting his golden pension. So he's walking away from his parliamentary, the job all of in itself is very luxurious. Yeah. But the pension, you're walking away from a pension 6 months before you're due to get it. Like, that's crazy. But anyways, we have talked about a lot, and I think we've come to the end of our list.
We have come to, it's guys, we're very sorry. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we're very sorry that we took so long this time. It's a very long episode, but it's worth it. It's packed with a lot of stuff.
But we're making up for all that time that people said that they missed just the two of us talking.
They did. So, we heard that a lot.
Yeah, I got it. Noka and I, we talked before this podcast, and we both brought it up, and it wasn't triggered by anybody. So we have both been getting people that, while you are so grateful to our guests for coming on, that you love just me and Noka sitting around and talking into the air. Well, I guess because people are listening, it's not talking into the air.
No, and we're talking to each other, so it's not so.
And we're talking to each other, and we've been doing this now since November.
Yes.
And we still very much like each other. We haven't yelled at each other or called each other names or anything like that. And I think that we're largely accomplishing what we started this podcast for.
I'm surprised by how far we've come.
Yeah. We have come very far, and we are very thankful for everybody who tuned in to listen, for everybody who messaged.
Today, 6 months.
6 months. And, we'll see what the future holds. We're discussing on what the future of this podcast is going to look like. And I hope that we hope that you all continue to listen. And regardless of, where you sit or who you voted for, we hope that we provide a space where you can come and you can listen to all sides of the argument, because after all, that's what makes this country great.
For sure.
So I think we'll end it there. I think I'll close it off this time. And thank you for everyone listening. And thank you, Noka, for coming again, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Cody.
Take
Have a
care.
great
Bye.
night. Bye.